So until Pearl joins, I'm just going to give a little bit of a background on Pearl. So she is actually the director of Della Group, and she's here now. So I'm going to invite Pearl to join. Hi, Pearl.
Hi,
We're
Nitya.
super excited to have you today.
Likewise.
So I was just giving our audience an introduction and background on you. So Pearl is the director of Della Group, and Della was actually started almost 20 years ago by Jimmy Mistry and has 6 business verticals spanning hospitality, real estate, construction, design, furniture, and recreation. And Pearl's involvement in the family business actually started while she was pursuing her undergraduate degree in Mumbai in HR college. And then she rejoined the company after a stint in London, where she was pursuing her master's in management at London Business School. And at just age 24, Pearl has already been featured in India Today Women as one of the 11 enterprising women with a taste for excellence, showcasing the true marquee of luxury. And also, Elle Decor has featured Pearl as the generation now to look out for in the design industry. And Pearl also has a certificate from the British Parliament for her contribution to women empowerment and art, and her sculpture is on display there. So as you all know, like Pearl at such a young age has already achieved so much, and we're so excited to have her.
Thank you so much. Thank you. That's
Pearl, with
very
that,
sweet of you.
I'm going to hand it over to you to give us a little bit more of a background on yourself and what your current role at Della is and how it's kind of evolved over your years at the company.
So, thank you, Nitya. So, Della was started about roughly 25 years ago. So, the company is practically as old as I am. And it was started by my dad, and it's gone through a sea change, and we've grown into 6 group verticals. Each one is all of them are growing in their own independent industries and spaces. But one thing that we feel in the underlying DNA of our company is that every business vertical is connected in the underlying factor of design. So design is something that we're all extremely passionate about. I've always grown up being very fond of it, and it did not plan out to be, but now in my role today, I look into the furniture designing aspect of it. We're setting up a 50,000 square foot retail showroom in Lonavala, which is going to be the flagship store for Della by Jimmy Mistry. So we are doing complete supply solutions of everything from home, offices, and hotel. And it's been an idea that's been brewing in Dad's head for about 5 years now. So I'm just really happy to be a part of it and contribute in the design space as well. While that is happening, it's been a very exciting year for me because I've managed to get a couple of projects that I'm handling independently. So it's given me a lot of, I think, amazing exposure and a lot of leeway to really pursue what I feel like doing as well, which has landed up being in the design space. So whether it's residential interiors or office interiors, there's been so much to learn from. And it's been a very exciting moment for me because I realized that everything that I had grown up seeing is now something that I'm able to do. So that's my role more or less now. But because it's a family business, you can never really define. I always say that what I do is absolutely permeable, which even means if it has to be that I'm second in line to look into the firefighting of different departments and verticals, I always look at it as a challenge, and I'm more than happy to take it up.
So, like you just said, I completely see the fact that when you're working in a family business, you're wearing multiple hats and you're juggling so many different roles. And even
Yeah,
though you may, by name, have something that you're supposed to be doing, you end up looking into everything because you're at home and that's like a
yeah.
topic of conversation all the time. So, given this, how do you balance your responsibilities? And then alongside that, how do you find the time, since you're bringing work home so often, to actually pursue your passions outside of this?
Nidhi, I think what you pointed out is extremely correct. Like, because it's a family business, and I always joke around and say I'm living in the same house as my boss. So work really never ends. And it's how it is. You're always discussing, you're always ideating. And no matter what you do, we could be watching something on Netflix, and somehow it always correlates back to work. Next thing you know, everyone's taken out their laptops and iPads and is researching. And at 2 in the morning, we've kind of switched to a complete work gear when we're supposed to still be relaxing at home. So it is very difficult because dad's always given work priority and it's never been at our expense, which is why we've always been so involved and engrossed growing up as well. So we're three siblings. I have a younger sister and a younger brother. And I think the two of them also feel as passionately as I do about this. But at the same time, it's not a joke. So some days, I'm not going to lie, I do feel that, everybody just needs to take a room to themselves, really stay away from each other and try to actually unwind and make the most of a weekend. So personally, for me, I'm still trying to find that work-life balance. But sometimes when I actually think about it, I always talk about a moment in everyone's life when there is a different priority. So when I was in the 11th and 12th grade, giving my IB exams and doing well was my priority. In undergrad, learning and applying for my master's was my priority. So at every stage, there's a different set of priorities that you need to keep. And at this stage in my life, and when it's just literally the onslaught of my career, I think work is a priority and it's okay. So even if a big chunk of my time at this moment goes into work, I think it's absolutely fine because I think if you put in all the hard work now, you can really enjoy, exponentially cutting down, I think, over time. But I think I really enjoy what I do. And if you find what you really are passionate about, then suddenly the difference between a work-life balance doesn't become so glaring because you enjoy both aspects and you're enjoying it. And like even in the lockdown, I think you don't really appreciate the time off if you think you've been very unproductive. So I think even to have a good work-life balance, you need to do some good amount of work so that you enjoy the rest of it.
Yeah, and this actually reminds me of a quote that I read about
Yeah.
entrepreneurship. Actually, one of my friends from Fempower sent it to me. But it said entrepreneurship is living your life for a few years like no one else would, so that you can live the rest of your life like no one else can. And I feel
Yeah.
like that resonates with so much of what you said. And still,
Yeah.
even though you're so committed to your work and doing so much, it's really admirable to see how big of an advocate you are for like Zoroastrians and women in business. And I know you've been doing a lot of work on that as well.
Yeah.
So that's really amazing. So you mentioned earlier that you're involved in a lot of the design, product and furniture and interior design aspects of Della now.
Yeah.
But you completed your master's in management from London Business School, and so you have pretty much of a strong business and commerce background. So I was just wondering, how did you pivot your skill set and kind of learn on the job to be able to do design, which is completely different from what you studied?
So it's actually been a very funny journey in the sense that I always wanted to be in design. And I thought I was one of those people with a plan where I had everything jotted out, the subjects I was going to take in school, the universities I was going to apply to, the kind of work that I wanted to do or courses that I wanted to do on the side, because I dedicated so much of my time towards feeling and believing that I'm only going to either become an architect or an interior designer. And when that moment actually came to go ahead and apply to architectural colleges, that's when I realized that, okay, it's not architecture that I want to do as much as I want to be a part of the family business. So all of a sudden, I had to rewire my entire thinking and put myself actually in a very uncomfortable position to say that, this is not what I'm going to do. So all of a sudden, I wasn't going to be applying abroad. I wasn't going to be, doing all the courses that I thought I was. And it was a very daunting moment at that point in time. But I realized that I wanted to focus on learning. So as far as there was ample amount of learning, it really didn't matter which field I took, which is why I went ahead and took a field such as business. So what I realized is that dad actually is a non-qualified architect, and yet he gets praises for works that he's done throughout in the industry. And I realized that it's not so much so as a formal education in this field that it comes down to, how much you actually self-learn in this kind of a scope. So even that being said, I took business and I went ahead and I always thought that, I really wanted to be a large part of the team. So if I did something like just design, I would be, contributing to 1/6 of Della Group's vertical. But if I was something more in I would say in a larger role and profile, that would be business. So I went to London Business School. I got my degree. I came back, and very clear again. Every time I think that this is what I'm going to do, it just completely turns around to be something else. And I realized I had to quickly start adapting into the role. And I don't think the role was laid out in front of me where I had to pivot. I think it happened very organically, and I let it. So, things were put onto my plate. And when I came back as well, one thing, if you ask me, how did I go ahead and learn? I think what I really focused on is shadowing my dad. So I think it's not just him or any meeting or even people he's meeting, because he's met with clients who are successful businessmen in their own domains. So I think one thing that I really always focus on is shadowing people. So you be a part of a room, you be a part of a meeting, and you just absorb as much as you can like a sponge. So I think once that starts happening, it is very little about the role you're playing and more about have you started understanding. And I always like to believe that the business side of things has helped me in design, because so many times there are designers who are extremely talented, but they're not able to run successful design practices because they've only thought as a designer so far. So I think I get that little bit of a benefit where I get to run the design practice as a business, because that's what we want to do. We want to get into retail. We want to get into e-stores. So I think it's been a bit of everything, and every day is a new learning challenge. I was in the middle put into purchase, a department that I absolutely didn't enjoy or had any kind of qualification in, but I understood that that was my dad's way of teaching me everything so that I had a pulse on every department within the company. So tomorrow, when you actually take a decision, it comes from a place of actual knowledge and understanding and experience versus just something that somebody has told you and you just take it at face value. So I think that's basically how I maneuvered and got myself into this role.
I think that's really great, and I think like adaptability should be one of the greatest skills that any successful entrepreneur should have, because your business is
Mm.
constantly evolving, the market you're operating in is constantly evolving,
Yeah.
and you should be able to change with that. So like we all know that you're working in the family business, and that's while a family business is something that it's natural for like a child to join something that their parent is doing. What were some of the factors that you considered before joining? Like, was there anything you were hesitant about, or were you always like, okay, this is something I want to do? Did you have any reservations about joining this?
So, Nitya, I think every family business really depends on what actually happens back at home, because that is the actual reality. So that really sets the foundation of what's going to happen at work. So I think a lot of people who come with that kind of hesitation, it's because they feel they don't have a voice in their own house, which is why they have the apprehension of actually joining a family business. And I think it's such a place where each one is to their own. So you really can't say anything. You could be having an amazing equation with your parents in the house or your family or your relatives, but what happens is you're not often very passionate about the business they're into. So I think it's a good blend between the two. You need to be passionate about what your company does. At the same time, have a very clear and good equation on the way things work and operate. So I think I've always been very understanding in terms of accepting that any decision that that dad makes comes out of a place of knowledge and a place of experience. So even though I'm allowed to have a voice, I'm allowed to have an opinion, and most times it's not just me, even my siblings are asked for their opinion and feedback, so as everybody else that we work with. So it's a culture that I think we worked well for us. So when I started off, like I said, that I've grown up seeing this. And because dad is someone who really has a terrible work-life balance, work was always home, and he was always discussing things with us. So I think ever since we started growing up, it was always something that we were used to. We were a part of it. And I don't really know there was ever a moment where I thought this is not what I'm going to do, or I even had a plan B. I remember in school and college, everybody always told me that, don't jump into the family business right away, intern with other people, do something else. The same thing happened when I went to London Business School, and people were just like, you've got this great opportunity. Why don't you stay back? Why don't you intern with a company? Why don't you work with another company for a good 2, 3 years and grasp something? But that's when you quickly have to evaluate where you stand. I would have loved to take the opportunity, but there are some pros and cons to the situation. I would be working in an amazing company in London, if things worked out, great. But would I be in a position where I would be a decision maker? So I mean, I would have spent 2 years learning something from someone in a very junior role, because that's what you get when you just start off in a professional capacity. And while that happens, it's a very different work environment. You're in a different country with different ways of operating. And a lot of my friends actually come back and say that, the biggest challenge that's been working in India after studying abroad for so many years is just adapting to the way business happens here. So I was very clear on all these fronts, and I realized that I didn't want to go ahead and do that. I didn't want to come back and be frustrated. I didn't want to come back and say that, but where I worked, this was the systems, this was the process. I didn't want to be in that place. So I realized the sooner I started working, and that's what I did. I worked before I went for my master's. So when I went, I was very clear on my strong points and, aspects that I was lagging behind in. So now I had a lot to learn from just different people who had worked at different organizations at once, or professors, and actually get all this information in a much shorter span of time that is relevant and applicable to my company. So it wasn't just a new system and software that somebody in supply chain is using. It was more about, can I use this in my distribution network? So I think that kind of a mind frame really helps, rather than just, seeing what works. And everything doesn't work for everyone. So, each family has to take that time out. More that you communicate and more amount of transparency really helps. So as a young person, or even my siblings, when they came in, I didn't do this, but my sister, for one, had a very clear structure that this is what she enjoys doing and this is what she's going to do. So so the approach that my parents had with me wasn't the approach that they had with her. And that's the same thing applicable throughout, So everybody that gets into a family business needs to address their own apprehensions and address it to the right people, being the family that they're working with. So I think that's very important.
I think that makes a lot of sense, and it's definitely like it's really great that you had all of this clear and understood beforehand, and went in with that mindset, because then you get so much more out of your education and your experience.
Yeah.
So
For
like,
me, it started off really I remember after my 10th grade was the first Salone de Mobile that my dad took me to, which is the Italian furniture fair. So I would say that was my first experience of working with him at the age of 16. And I remember coming back and he told me, okay, we went for these meetings. These are the companies we met. Now you start your communication with them. You keep in touch with them. You see how do we take things forward. So I started getting that little essence of things at a far younger age. So I think that also helped me just, evaluate my decisions accordingly.
yeah, and getting that type of autonomy so early on in your career is, it's like great to really spur your career and like help you grow so
Yeah.
much faster.
Yeah.
So I guess, a lot of people have the hesitation of like, okay, if I work with my dad, are people going to be paying attention to me because of my quality of work and because of the legacy that I'm creating, or because of the name that he's built? So within Della, how do you think you are trying to create your own path and your own legacy, and how do you bring the meaning of what it is to be an entrepreneur within like this existing organization that has been founded?
Yeah. No, I think that's a very valid question, because it's something that I definitely felt, right? And it was something that was going on in my own head till I actually told myself that I'm just complicating things for me further. Maybe there is nobody out there who actually thinks that way, and I'm just saying all these things and, ruining my own self-esteem. So the first thing I did is put that thought out of my head. And I realized, and Dad always says that, hard work speaks for itself. So I had nothing to prove to anyone. I had to prove to my work, and I had to dedicate myself to my work. So if I spent all this time and attention and really wondering what everyone around me thought, I would have got nowhere. So I, shut off all these extra voices that were absolutely unnecessary and unneeded, and got down into focusing what was actually important. So coming down to that, I think you still need to understand and you still need to appreciate and acknowledge the position you come with. So I think, the Bollywood industry gets so much backslash for nepotism. And, it's not just Bollywood, it happens everywhere. But what you need to understand is you need to be aware about it. You cannot, I think, ignore the fact that it happens. You have to be honest about it and say, yes, I feel the pressure is much more. Because now I know people, anything that I do, no matter what I take up, whether it is with the family business or ever on my own, I'm always going to be compared to my father. And so are my siblings. Because that's just how I think, are wired as people. So it's okay. I think it's absolutely fine. I don't mind it completely. And I also feel at the same time, somebody told me very early on not to have a martyr complex. So just because you need to do something good in life does not mean you have to struggle and come up. At the same time, you have to be aware that you're given a platform. Now the pressure is on you to deliver from there. So what are you going to do now that there is a head start? How are you going to go and utilize this? How are you going to actually go and do something worthy and worthwhile? That's where the pressure comes in. And that's the kind of good pressure you should keep on yourself, where you are just competing with yourself. You're focusing on your work. When I came into the office, I think one thing that I did was, like I said, I came in much younger and I didn't want this boss's daughter label and title on me. So, I came in and I took up every role. I worked with every department and I was very respectful to all the opinions that people had. So I made sure that I started setting my own identity independent of my family or the business role. So I started doing that. And I think everyone appreciates hard work when people see that you put in the amount of hard work that you do, and that sometimes, you do have good ideas and opinions. They organically begin to accept you, and not because they have to. So I think that is something that I consciously work on. I never impose my ideas on someone. And I think that's what we've learned in the organization as a whole. It's not just me, but everybody around us. We're always accepting. And I think that's the only way to move forward. And if you bring in that same family value culture system into the business, everyone around you and the whole team actually starts considering the business as their own family. So I think that is a plus point, and you need to bring that in. And if you work towards, what you're supposed to be doing, your role, and focusing less time and attention on where it's going to lead you, what people are going to say, I think you're much better off.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, because I always feel like, if you really think that you can add to an organization
Yeah.
in a meaningful way, rather than thinking, okay, I have to start from scratch because I want to build something for myself, you should just elevate the platform that you've been given and really build something within that. So, at the beginning of this call, I started by saying entrepreneurship is a mindset, and to
Yeah.
be an entrepreneur, you don't have to be a founder. And everything you said has been so great. To wrap it up, is there anything that you think you would like to share, advice, something you wish people had told you, or something that someone told you that is really valuable to young entrepreneurs and founders out there in our Fempower community?
So I can't think of an immediate pointer to give somebody, but I think focusing on this word, the title of our conversation, that entrepreneurship is a mindset, is very important. Because a lot of people feel that, we have that entrepreneurial instinct, but we don't have the platform, we don't have that big idea, we don't want to take the plunge just yet. It's okay, you can start in your own capacity. And even though we have an organization that's very professional, we have 6 verticals, we have designated roles, we have designated ways of working, there's always scope and capacity to grow. And that only happens when someone thinks out of the box. So I always feel that even when there is a fixed way of working, or there's a business model already laid out, you have to be upgrading yourself. You have to stay relevant, and you can bring in that entrepreneurial mindset into it. You can always add value and innovate within that space and do something differently. So I don't think just because you have a particular role is where you have to be stuck at it. You've made this boundary for yourself. So it doesn't matter on what you do, which industry you're in, you can really go out there and innovate and think creatively. I think marketing is one such platform that shows you that you've studied one thing, you work in one company, but why is it that you're so easily able to study another brand, their image, and work out with a great marketing plan for them? So, it's just about, because marketing tells you to go out of the box. It's not just marketing. Every role actually requires you to think that way and be a little more creative. So, literally, entrepreneurship is a mindset, and I'm actually lucky to be able to be a bit of this new startup journey, because while the lockdown was on, we've been working on a new business idea. So it's something that's been going on for 3.5 months now. So the office environment feels like a startup. We got, post-its all over the wall, applying design thinking approaches to see what we can do. We're working on catalogs and brochures. We're talking to people. We're doing like small, peer groups to just understand what people feel is the scope for this business, what ideas they have to say. So I've been lucky that this mindset is actually being put to use actually in a startup. But besides that, I don't think anybody needs to restrict themselves. It's about how you are. The passion to learn and grow has to be there. And you will be so surprised to see that organizations you're working in truly appreciate this value that you have to bring in. So I think you shouldn't be afraid to speak your mind, talk to your seniors, talk to your bosses, talk to people you report to, talk to a colleague, and they'll be more than happy to implement your idea into the work environment that you're at. So definitely. That's one point I'd like to share.
And I think it's great that, Della, despite having existed
Hmm.
for such a long time, because of like hiring, I guess, people or like with younger people like you that come in with that entrepreneurial mindset can still keep the organization young and like the culture young
Yeah.
and help bring passion in. Because I think one of the biggest things that I've learned, at least through my internship experiences, is that when I feel like I'm bringing something to the table beyond just doing what someone said to me, that's when I really feel passionate about what
Yeah.
I'm doing and enjoy my job.
Yeah.
So it's a great takeaway for everyone that
Yeah.
you can bring in that element of entrepreneurship no matter what you do and where you work. And so with that, I would just like to thank you so much, Pearl, for joining us.
Thank you. I just want to drop in a quick comment that I don't know why my screen is frozen ever since we started. So I've not been able to see anybody who's tuned in or any of the comments. So I'm so sorry if I've not acknowledged it. But please reach out to us, and I'm sure Nitya will summarize the whole thing for me. Thank you so much, and good luck to the whole Fempower team. I'm so excited to see what you guys are doing. I think some of the women that you've got on board, and I'm seeing on your Instagram page, I personally want to network with, I personally want to get in touch with. So I'm so excited for this, and I hope you guys grow way more. Now that we've established there's nothing like a global, boundary, I think there is such great scope for this. Thank you so much, and I'm so happy to be doing this segment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you everyone for tuning in today. We really appreciate it. If you have any questions for Pearl, feel free to reach out to us, and we'd be happy to like pass them along. And if you have any questions for Fempower, please DM us or visit our website. And
Get on board, Fempower. That's the next big thing.
thank you so much.
Thank you.
Please
See
feel
you.
free to reach out. Bye everyone. Thank you.
Bye.